Jessica's voice sliced through the air. "She's not eating with us. Put her somewhere else. I am Evelyn. I am 68 years old, and I manage real estate investments. They think I am a frail widow, but they don't know that I own the very floor they are standing on. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration, or at least that's what the calendar says. Mother's Day was always sacred in my house when my husband, Arthur, was alive. He would wake up early, fill the house with fresh gardenias, my favorite flowers, and play old jazz records on the vintage turntable. But Arthur passed away 5 years ago, and with him went the respect that gray hair used to command in this family. Now, there is only me, Grandma Evelyn, who seems to be more of an old piece of furniture cluttering the living room than a flesh-and-blood person to my daughter-in-law, Jessica. I dressed with care this morning. I chose my cream-colored tailored suit, the one I bought at a boutique downtown years ago, which still holds an impeccable cut. I pinned on the pearl brooch my mother gave me and made sure to style my silver hair in a low, neat bun, just the way I like it. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who has worked hard all her life. My hands have age spots, yes, but they are the hands that signed the deeds for the first plots of land when no one would bet a dime on that part of the city. My son, Jason, came to pick me up in his new SUV. That SUV that I know he's paying off in eternal installments because his architecture firm isn't doing as well as he boasts. As I climbed in, the smell of Jessica's cheap perfume hit my nose. She was in the passenger seat, typing furiously on her iPhone without even turning her head to say good morning. My grandchildren, 2 teenagers who seemed to live in a virtual world, barely murmured a, "Hi, Grandma," before returning to their screens. "We're going to the Ember Room," Jason said, looking at me through the rearview mirror with that guilty look he's had since he was a child breaking plates. "It's the trendy spot, Mom. They say it's very exclusive." I smiled slightly. Of course I knew the place. I know every square foot of commercial real estate in this city because, although my family thinks I survive on Social Security checks and knitting blankets, the reality is quite different. When Arthur died, everyone thought I would sell everything. But no. I dedicated myself to managing, buying, and investing in silence. My name is on the deeds of half the commercial district, but I use an LLC, a limited liability company, so no one bothers me asking for loans or favors. Sterling Oak Properties. That is the name of my silent empire. The ride was uncomfortable. Jessica complained about the traffic, the heat, and that the dry cleaners had ruined a blouse. Jason nodded at everything, submissive. It hurt me to see my son like this. I raised him to be a strong man with character, but it seems that love or comfort has made him soft. He knows Jessica doesn't like me. According to her, I am old-fashioned, and my opinions on child-rearing are toxic, the buzzword for everything she doesn't like. We arrived at the restaurant. It was an elegant place, with exposed brick walls and rustic yet polished wooden tables. There was a constant hum of conversation and the clinking of expensive silverware. The smell of grilled steaks and rosemary filled the air. It was a good location. I myself had approved the lease renewal 2 months ago. Although the restaurant owner, a certain Mr. Moretti, always deals with my lawyers and has never seen my face. There were many people waiting, but Jason had a reservation. We approached the host stand. The maitre d', a tall, well-groomed young man, smiled at us. "Welcome, the Sterling family. Table for 5, correct?" It was in that precise instant, while the young man was grabbing the menus, that Jessica stopped dead in her tracks. She turned to Jason and whispered something in his ear, but with that volume used when you want to be heard, but are feigning discretion. "Jason, no. Today I want a peaceful day. Your mother starts criticizing how the kids eat and it stresses me out. It's my day too." Jason went pale. He looked at me, then looked at his wife. "Jessica, please." "It's my mom," he stammered. "It's my day," she hissed, locking eyes with him. "Besides, the table they gave us is a round booth. We're going to be very tight. I don't want to be bumping elbows." The maitre d' waited with a frozen smile, holding the menus. People in the waiting area were starting to stare. I felt heat rising up my neck. It wasn't shame for myself, it was shame for them. Then Jessica addressed the host with that shrill, authoritative voice she uses with the cleaning ladies. "Excuse me, there's been a change." She pointed at me with a finger tipped with a long acrylic nail. "She's not eating with us at the main table. Get her a separate table, a small one." The world seemed to stop for a second. The maître d' blinked, confused. Pardon me, ma'am? A separate table? But it's Mother's Day. I'm speaking English, aren't I? Jessica interrupted, raising her voice. We want family privacy. Put her at another table, and make sure it's not right next to ours, please. 30 people. I counted at least 30 heads that turned in the lobby. I felt their gazes sticking into my back like pins. There was pity in some eyes, disbelief in others, and pure morbid curiosity in most. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to say something, to slam his hand on the counter, to take me by the arm and lead us out of there. But Jason lowered his head, adjusted his tie, and looked at the floor, unable to hold my gaze. Do what my wife says, please, he murmured. The silence that followed that sentence was more painful than any scream. My own son, the boy whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose college tuition I paid for by scrubbing floors and taking in sewing jobs when Arthur hit a rough patch in the business. That man was now bowing his head to a cruel whim. The host, visibly embarrassed, looked at me. Ma'am, I am so sorry. We have a small table near the service station in the corner. It's the only thing available due to the holiday. That's fine, I said. My voice came out firm, surprisingly calm. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Not here, not in front of these people. Take me to that table, young man. I walked with my back straight. I passed by the table assigned to them, a spacious and comfortable booth in the center of the room under a beautiful chandelier. Jessica sat down triumphantly, placing her designer handbag on the empty seat next to her, as if the bag deserved more space than I did. My grandchildren were already on their phones, oblivious to the atrocity that had just occurred. The host guided me to the back, near the swinging kitchen doors. The spot was noisy. Every time the servers entered or exited, a gust of hot air and the smell of grease hit me, mixed with the shouting of the cooks. The table was tiny, the kind used to hold ice buckets or for when someone comes in alone for a quick coffee. I'll bring you the wine list immediately, ma'am, the young man said, almost whispering, his ears red with second-hand embarrassment. Don't worry, son, I replied, placing my napkin over my lap. Bring me a glass of Cabernet, the best you have, and the chef's special. I don't need to see the menu. I was left alone. From my corner, I could see my family's table in the distance. I saw Jessica laughing, throwing her head back, toasting with a mimosa. Jason was eating with a lost gaze. Was he thinking of me, or was he simply relieved not to have to deal with an argument? A treacherous tear rolled down my cheek and fell onto the white tablecloth. I wiped it quickly with my finger. Don't cry, Evelyn, I told myself. Crying is for those who have no options, and you have many. While I waited for my food, I started doing what I always do. Observe. I stopped being the rejected mother and became the businesswoman. I looked at the floor. The wooden baseboards were worn and dirty. I looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain right above a table where a large family was eating, a sign that the leak from the second floor hadn't been fixed, despite what the building manager reported. I listened to the servers passing by me. The ice machine at the bar broke again, and the manager says the owner doesn't want to release the funds for a new one complained. And the back restrooms are clogged. We need to call a plumber urgently before the smell reaches the dining room, answered another. Interesting. Very interesting. This establishment, the Ember Room, pays considerable rent. In the contract I signed, or rather, that my legal representative signed under my strict instructions, it clearly stipulates that the maintenance of internal facilities is the tenant's responsibility, while structural improvements are mine. However, if the tenant neglects the image of the place, affecting the building's property value, I have clauses for immediate termination. I took a sip of the wine they brought me. It was an excellent Cabernet with full body. I closed my eyes and let the flavor cleanse the bitterness from my mouth. For years, I have let them underestimate me. I have let Jessica think I am an old-fashioned little lady living on memories. I have let Jason believe his success is due solely to his talent, without knowing that I was the one who recommended his firm to the biggest real estate developers in the region, demanding total anonymity. I have pulled the strings of their lives so they wouldn't lack anything, so they would have opportunities I never had as a young woman. And this is how they repay me. With a table in the corner next to the trash and dirty dishes, I looked toward their table again. Jessica was taking a selfie, making that ridiculous duck face, with Jason in the background forcing a smile. She would surely upload it to social media with the caption, "Perfect Mother's Day with Family." The hypocrisy churned my stomach more than the smell of frying oil from the kitchen. But something changed inside me at that moment. The deep sadness, the one that crushes the chest, began to transform. It cooled, hardened, became something solid and heavy, like a gold bar. I remembered when Arthur and I bought our first property. It was a ruin. We worked day and night, painting, fixing, carrying bags of cement. My hands were full of calluses and my back was breaking, but I never complained. I learned to negotiate with tough suppliers. I learned to read the fine print of contracts. I learned that in business, as in life, the one who shows fear loses. Today they showed me that, to them, I am worth nothing as a mother. That's fine. If they don't love me as a mother, they will have to respect me as a landlord. The server returned with my plate. A juicy ribeye with truffle mashed potatoes. It looked delicious. "Ma'am," the boy said, hesitating a little, "I know it's not my business, but what they did to you has no name. If you want, I can ask the manager to find you another spot. Maybe at the bar? It's livelier." I looked him in the eyes. He had kind eyes. Hazel. He reminded me of Jason when he was young, before ambition and weakness changed him. "Don't worry, son. I'm fine here." In fact, I took my phone out of my purse, a latest generation model I usually keep put away so as not to scare Jessica with my technology. "I need you to do me a very special favor." "Tell me, ma'am, is the manager here today?" "Yes, Mr. Reynolds is in the office, pretty stressed about the air conditioning issue." "Good. When I finish eating, I want you to take a note to him from me, but I don't want you to give it to him now. Give it to him just when my family asks for the check." I took one of my personal cards from my wallet, not the ones that say Evelyn Sterling, homemaker, but the others. The ones made of thick ivory cardstock with gold embossed letters that read, "Evelyn Sterling, President, Sterling Oak Properties." I turned the card over and wrote a brief message with my fountain pen. My hands didn't shake. My handwriting was firm and elegant. "Young man, bring me another wine, please," I told the server, handing him the card face down so he wouldn't read it yet. "And make sure Mr. Reynolds receives this personally. Tell him the lady at the corner table needs to speak about the lease renewal and the conduct of his customers." The boy took the card with curiosity, but nodded with respect. I ate my steak calmly, savoring every bite. I watched my daughter-in-law gesticulate, probably criticizing the food or the service. I knew that with every minute that passed, the rope was tightening. They thought they had punished me by putting me in the dark. They didn't realize that the dark is where strategies are best planned. I ate alone, yes, but I was never in better company. I was accompanied by my dignity, my history, and above all, by the absolute power I was about to let fall upon that table. I wiped my lips with the cloth napkin, adjusted my pearl brooch, and waited. The show was about to begin. From my corner, the panorama was different. People usually think the best seats are by the windows or under the crystal chandeliers, but they are wrong. The best seats are those where you can see everything without being seen. Here, between the swing of the kitchen door and the smell of industrial detergent mixed with garlic, I had a panoramic view of my own family's decay and, curiously, my own business. While sipping the wine, which was at the perfect temperature, a small victory amidst the disaster, I pulled out my phone. Jessica always mocks that I use granny glasses to read the screen, but those glasses allow me to see what she, with all her youth and arrogance, ignores. I unlocked the phone with my fingerprint and opened the cloud file management app. No Facebook or cooking recipes here. I went directly to the folder Commercial Properties, NI North Zone. There was the lease agreement for the Ember Room. I opened it, and the PDF document unfolded before my eyes. I zoomed in with my fingers. I remembered the general clauses. Of course, I had drafted them with my legal team. But I needed to verify the specific details, the fine print, which is what really matters when one wants to tighten the screws. I read attentively. Clause 14. B. Maintenance of image and service standards. It clearly stated that the lessee was obliged to maintain an environment of respect and decorum that did not affect the reputation of the property. I smiled to myself. Allowing a customer to discriminate against another based on age, segregating her to a service zone, could technically be considered a violation of the hospitality standards I demand in my properties. But there was something more interesting in Clause 21. Renewal and adjustments. The contract expired next month. We were in the 30-day grace period to negotiate renewal or termination without penalty. Well, I murmured, swiping my finger across the screen. Mr. Moretti, Mr. Reynolds, you are walking on thin ice, and you aren't even wearing skates. I looked up from the phone and observed the restaurant with an auditor's eyes. I no longer saw just a pretty place. I saw the cracks in management. I saw the manager, Mr. Reynolds, arguing heatedly with a vendor in a corner, wiping sweat from his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. Fear was evident on his face. Sales probably hadn't met expectations this quarter, and he knew that Sterling Oak Properties didn't forgive late rent. If he knew that the master of his fate was sitting 30 feet away, eating alone and being ignored by his waitstaff, he'd probably have a heart attack right there. This information was my ammunition. For years, I let Jason handle his own affairs, intervening only from the shadows to open doors he believed he had kicked open himself. I let Jessica think my money had vanished into medical bills and bad deals after Arthur died. Why did I do it? Out of love? Or perhaps a foolish hope? I wanted them to love me for being Evelyn, the mother and grandmother, not Evelyn, the walking checkbook. How wrong I was. I looked at my hands on the tablecloth. These hands had washed other people's floors when I was young. They had carried boxes of merchandise at the wholesale market before Arthur and I could buy our first little shop. These hands knew the cold of early morning and the heat of noon working under the sun. I remembered an afternoon, about 15 years ago. Arthur was already sick, but his mind remained as brilliant as a diamond. We were sitting on the porch watching the rain fall. "Evie," he said, taking my hand, "you are stronger than me. When I'm gone, don't let the vultures eat you. Not the ones outside, and not the ones inside." "Don't say that, Artie," I replied with a lump in my throat. "I say it because I know you. You have a heart of gold, but the head of a general. Use your head, Evelyn. Keep your heart for those who earn it." My eyes misted over remembering him. I had disobeyed Arthur. I had left my heart exposed and my head tucked away in the nightstand drawer. I had allowed Jessica to trample me at every family gathering, criticizing my clothes, my food, my way of speaking. "Oh, Evelyn, you're always so old-fashioned." "Oh, mother-in-law, better not offer opinions on modern things." And I stayed silent. Silent so as not to cause problems. Silent so Jason wouldn't have to choose between his wife and his mother. But today, seeing Jason eat in silence, without even daring to look toward my corner, I understood that he had already chosen, and he hadn't chosen me. The sadness I felt minutes ago had evaporated completely. Now, what I felt was absolute mental clarity. It was as if I had removed a blindfold I'd been wearing for 5 years. I observed the main table again. Jessica was sending a dish back. I saw her exaggerated gestures, waving her hands in front of a young waitress who looked about to cry. "This is cold," I could read on her lips. "Take it away and bring me another." "This is ridiculous." The waitress removed the plate with trembling hands. Jason didn't even flinch. He kept looking at his phone. My grandchildren, absorbed in their worlds. That woman, my daughter-in-law, felt powerful because she could yell at an employee making minimum wage. She felt important because she carried a designer bag she probably bought on credit and was sitting at the best table. What a small and fragile concept of power she had. True power makes no noise. True power doesn't need to scream or humiliate waiters. True power is sitting at the ugliest table in the restaurant, eating alone, and knowing that with a single phone call, you could buy the entire building, fire the entire staff, and turn the restaurant into a parking lot if you felt like it. That contrast between what they thought I was and what I really am provoked a strange satisfaction in me. It was like having an ace up my sleeve in a poker game where everyone else is cheating. I took another sip of wine. I needed to refine the plan. Revealing my identity wasn't enough. That would be vulgar. A rich person's tantrum. No. I needed to teach a lesson. A lesson in humility for Jessica, a lesson in manhood for Jason, and a lesson in customer service for Mr. Reynolds. I called the waiter with a discreet wave of my hand. The boy, the same one with the kind eyes, came immediately. I noticed he had been keeping an eye on me, unlike his colleagues who only attended the large tables, hoping for juicy tips. "Tell me, Mrs. Sterling, is everything okay with the steak?" "Exquisite, son. Thank you. What is your name?" "Michael, ma'am, at your service." "Michael, Tell me one thing, and I want you to be honest with me. Nothing will happen to you, I promise. How does the manager, Mr. Reynolds, treat you?" Michael hesitated, looking sideways, nervous. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I have grandsons your age. I know when a boy is putting up with things he shouldn't. I saw how he spoke to the cashier a while ago." Michael sighed, dropping his shoulders as if releasing a heavy load. "The truth, ma'am, is it's difficult. He deducts from our tips if something breaks, even if it's an accident. He makes us work double shifts without extra pay and always says if we don't like it, we can leave, that there are 100 waiting outside. The building owner supposedly demands a lot. That's what he says. But we never see improvements." I pressed my lips together. So Reynolds was using my name, or my company's, to justify his tyranny. The owner demands a lot. A lie. I have never demanded that anyone be exploited. "I see," I said softly. "Thank you for telling me, Michael. That is very instructive." I took a small notepad and a pen from my purse. I wrote, "Review payroll and working conditions of service staff in renewal contract. Surprise audit Monday 8:02 a.m. I tore off the page and put it in my pocket. That was for me. Then I looked at Michael intently. "Michael, do you trust me?" The boy blinked, surprised by the question. He looked into my eyes, those old, tired eyes that now shone with a dangerous spark of mischief. "Yes, ma'am. I don't know why, but yes. You remind me of my grandmother." "Good. We are going to play a game, you and I. A game of justice." I motioned for him to come closer. He leaned in. "My family over there," I signaled discreetly with my head, "is going to ask for the check at any moment. Jessica," the woman yelling, "is surely going to want to split the bill or make some scene with my son's credit card. I want you to attend that table at the end." "But ma'am, that's not my section." "It doesn't matter. Do your coworker a favor. Tell him the little old lady in the corner asked for you to bring the check. And when you bring it, I want you to hand over this." I took another card from my wallet. But this wasn't the business card I had given him earlier for the manager. This was a matte black debit card, limitless, the kind banks only give you when you have 7-figure investments. The corporate black card of Sterling Oak Properties. "You want to pay their bill?" Michael asked, confused. "Oh, no, son, heaven forbid." I let out a dry little laugh. "I'm not going to pay for their food. I'm going to pay for the restaurant." Michael looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Excuse me? Listen to me carefully. Mr. Reynolds has my business card in his office, right? The one I gave you earlier." "Yes, I left it on his desk, but I think he hasn't read it well because he was yelling on the phone." "Perfect. I want you to go to the office right now. Interrupt his call. Tell him that, Mrs. Evelyn Sterling, the owner of Sterling Oak Properties, is here eating at the broom table and wants to pay the bill for the entire room, for all the tables. Except one." Michael's eyes went wide as saucers. "For all the tables? Except your son's?" "Exactly. I want to buy lunch for all those mothers celebrating over there, for the lady with the crying baby, for the grandmother in the wheelchair by the entrance, for everyone, except table 5. Charge them down to the last cent, including full service." Michael started to smile, a slow smile that transformed into an expression of absolute complicity. He understood. He understood that this wasn't charity. It was a declaration of war. "And one more thing, Michael," I added, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tell Reynolds to come out. I want him personally to go to my son's table to explain why today the house is treating everyone except them. And I want to see his face when he realizes who I am." "Understood, Mrs. Sterling." Michael stood up, seeming an inch taller. "I'll do it now. Wait until they order dessert. Let them get comfortable. Let Jessica believe she has won the day. And then drop the hammer." Michael nodded and retreated toward the kitchen, walking with renewed purpose. I leaned back in the hard, uncomfortable chair. I looked at my glass of wine, swirling the red liquid against the light. In the distance, I saw Jason getting up to go to the restroom. He passed near my area but looked the other way, deliberately avoiding crossing his gaze with mine. His cowardice hurt, yes, but it no longer paralyzed me. If he wanted to be a stranger, I would treat him like a stranger. And in my world of business, strangers who don't respect contracts or hierarchies are taught to respect, or they are terminated. I felt a cold calm invade me. I was no longer the sad widow. I was the matriarch. I was the boss. And I was about to turn this Mother's Day lunch into a legend that would be told in this restaurant for years. My phone buzzed. It was an automated message from the bank confirming my available balance, enough to buy this place 10 times over. "Enjoy your mimosa, Jessica," I thought, fixing my eyes on the back of her neck, "because it's going to be the last sweet thing you taste for a long time." Everything was ready. The pieces were on the board. All that was missing was for the king, or in this case, the manager, to realize that the queen had already delivered checkmate from the darkest corner of the room. I saw Michael disappear behind the dark wooden door of the management office. He walked with a straight back, holding my black card in his hand as if carrying a royal decree. At that moment, the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade for me. The clinking of cutlery, the laughter from neighboring tables, the cry of a baby in the distance, everything became a background hum. I was left alone with the beating of my own heart, which wasn't racing from fear, but from that cold, calculated adrenaline I felt before closing a $1 million deal. I ordered an espresso to accompany the wait. I needed the bitter, strong flavor to keep me alert. From my corner that Jessica had designated for my humiliation, I had absolute control of the stage. It was ironic. She thought that by sending me to the service table, she was hiding me, erasing me from the perfect family photo. She didn't realize she had placed me in the watchtower. From here, I saw trays coming out late. I saw kitchen assistants wiping sweat with their uniform sleeves. And I saw, above all, the farce that was table number 5. Jason barely touched his food. I know him well. When he's nervous, he cuts meat into tiny pieces and moves them from one side of the plate to the other without bringing them to his mouth. He was suffering, yes, but his suffering was silent. Cowardly. He didn't have the courage to get up, come find me, and seat me at his table, even if we were squeezed in. He preferred the peace of not contradicting his wife over the dignity of honoring his mother. That pain no longer made me cry. Now it served as fuel. Jessica, on the contrary, was in her prime. I saw her call a waitress with that dismissive wave of her hand, snapping her fingers without looking her in the face. "Girl." I could read on her bright red lips. "More ice, and tell the manager the music is too loud." Poor delusional woman. She felt like the queen of the ball without knowing the orchestra was about to stop playing for her. Time seemed to stretch. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. The door to the manager's office remained closed. I started drumming my fingers on the cheap Formica table. Was Reynolds calling the bank to verify the card? Probably. A no-limit card in the name of an LLC held by an elderly woman dressed in an out-of-style suit might raise suspicions. Let him call, I thought with a twisted smile. Let them confirm that the lady in the corner has enough capital to buy his loyalty and his fear. Suddenly, the dynamic in the dining room shifted subtly. The servers, who previously rushed by, started slowing their pace near the office. The rumor had spread. In kitchens and service corridors, news flies faster than light. Michael must have said something on his way out. Or perhaps the manager's face upon seeing my name in the system was enough to alert the staff. I felt several curious glances from employees sticking to me. They no longer looked at me with pity for being the abandoned grandma. Now they looked at me with that mixture of curiosity and reverential fear one has for someone holding a dangerous secret. Then, the management door burst open. Mr. Reynolds came out as if he had been shoved. He was a short, balding man with a suit that was a bit too tight at the waist. Generally, he walked through the room with his chest puffed out, greeting only the tables ordering expensive bottles. But now it seemed he had forgotten how to walk. He was pale, with that sickly pallor of someone who has just realized they made a fatal error. In one hand, he held my ivory business card. In the other, he held my black card with both hands, as if it were a sacred relic he feared dropping. His eyes swept the restaurant in desperation, ignoring customers raising their hands for the check, ignoring even Jessica waving at him from her central table. His eyes sought the corner. They sought the broom table. They sought the owner. When his gaze crossed mine, I saw his jaw unhinge. He swallowed so hard I could almost hear it from 30 feet away. He adjusted his tie with trembling hands and began the march toward me. He wasn't walking. He was making a pilgrimage. Michael came a few steps behind him with a serious face, but his eyes shone with delicious mischief. He winked at me discreetly before diverting toward the kitchen. "Good boy." Reynolds arrived at my table and almost doubled over in a clumsy bow. "Mrs. Sterling, Evelyn, ma'am." he stammered, his voice broken by nerves. My God, I had no idea. I mean, the staff didn't inform me. What a massive shame. I remained seated, immobile. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting him sweat. Sit down, Reynolds, I ordered in a low voice. It wasn't an invitation, it was an instruction. The man looked at the plastic chair across from me as if it were an electric chair, but he sat on the edge, ready to bolt. Ma'am, please, allow me to move you immediately, he started, wiping sweat from his forehead with a wrinkled handkerchief. We have the private room available, or the table by the bay window. I will displace whoever is there. This is unacceptable. A woman of your position here, next to the service door. I raised a hand to silence him. Spare me the theater, Reynolds. I've been here an hour. I've seen 30 steaks go out, 3 of which were sent back. I've seen 2 servers slip near the bar because no one dried the floor. I've smelled the drain from the men's room from here, and I've seen how you treat your staff. Reynolds turned even paler, if that was possible. Ma'am, we had problems with the plumber and the staff today the lease agreement, I interrupted with a soft but firm voice. Clause 14. Section B. The lessee commits to maintaining standards of hygiene and service of the highest category. Does that ring a bell? Because it's going to sound very interesting to my lawyers when I tell them I'm eating next to a trash can because your staff allowed me to be segregated. I didn't know, he squeaked in a desperate whisper. It was the lady at table 5, she insisted. She said that you— I know what she said. And you, as manager, should have had the judgment not to permit discrimination in my building. But let's leave that for the meeting on Monday morning, where we will decide if you still have a job or not. Reynolds looked about to cry. He loosened the knot of his tie. He knew he was cornered. Sterling Oak Properties wasn't just the name on his rent check. It was the entity that could terminate his contract and leave him on the street with $1 million debt for breach of contract. Whatever you say, Mrs. Sterling. Whatever you order. I will do anything to amend this. I smiled. That was the phrase I was waiting for. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the small table. Very well, Reynolds. Let's make a deal. You want to keep your contract, and I want to celebrate Mother's Day properly. Yes, of course. What do you desire? The best bottle of wine? Caviar? I want you to use this card. I pointed to the black plastic he still held with reverence, and pay the bill for every occupied table in this restaurant right now. Reynolds blinked, confused. For everyone? There are about 40 tables, ma'am. That's thousands of dollars. Does it look like I'm worried about money? I arched an eyebrow. No, of course not. Then I'm treating everyone. Listen carefully. I lowered my voice, forcing him to lean further toward me. You are going to go to every table. You are going to tell them that Sterling Oak Properties, the owner of the building, is gifting them their meal for Mother's Day. Tell them to order dessert, another round. I want people to applaud. I want them to feel happy. Understood, ma'am. It's a very generous gesture, but there is one exception. My voice hardened, becoming cold as steel. Reynolds looked toward where Jason and Jessica were. Jessica was now touching up her makeup, looking into her phone camera. Your family's table? He asked, astonished. Exactly. You are not to buy that table so much as a glass of water. I want you to charge them for everything. The service, the cover charge, the drinks, even the air they breathe, if you could put a price on it. And when they finish and ask for the check, I want you personally to go and explain that the house treated everyone except them. Reynolds looked at me with wide eyes. He was starting to understand the game. He was starting to see that the old woman in the corner wasn't a victim, but an executioner with a velvet guillotine. And if they ask why, he whispered, tell them the promotion is for mothers who eat with their children, and that the owner of the building has very strict policies regarding ingratitude. The manager nodded slowly. There was fear in his eyes, yes, but a spark of admiration was also born. No one respects power more than those who abuse it when they have it. Oh, and one more thing, Reynolds, I added as he stood up. Before going to give the news to the tables, bring me another glass of that Cabernet and tell Michael to come here. He will be my liaison for the rest of the afternoon. You stay away until it's time to collect. As you order, Mrs. Sterling. Reynolds walked away, almost running toward the register. I saw him typing frantically, giving instructions to the cashiers who looked at him with open mouths. Then, I saw the atmosphere of the restaurant begin to transform. The manager started his rounds at the back tables. I saw him approach a large family. He spoke softly and pointed toward the ceiling, a white lie, as if the blessing came from heaven or the structure itself. I saw the looks of surprise on the diners. I saw the smiles. An older lady brought her hands to her chest. A man raised his glass, looking toward nowhere, thankful. The wave of joy moved closer to the center of the room. The murmur grew. "It's free," I heard someone say. "The owner is treating," others said. The waiters started serving desserts and champagne with renewed energy, knowing that tips on a paid bill are usually generous. And in the middle of that rising tide of happiness, Table 5 remained like a desert island. Jason and Jessica looked around, bewildered. They saw waiters bringing bottles to neighboring tables. They saw people laughing and celebrating. I saw Jessica stop a waiter passing with a tray of desserts. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked with that demanding tone that grated on my nerves. "Why are they bringing them that? We didn't order dessert yet, but if they're giving things away—" The waiter, who had already been instructed by Reynolds or by the Kitchen Gossip Network, stopped. He looked at her with icy courtesy. "It's a courtesy of the administration for certain tables, ma'am. In a moment, your server will take your order." And he kept walking. Jessica turned to Jason, indignant. "Did you see that? What terrible service. The people next to us got cake and they ignore us. Jason, say something. This is the last straw." Jason, uncomfortable, looked around. "Jessica, keep your voice down. It's probably a birthday or something." "What birthday? It's the whole restaurant. Look over there." Jessica pointed toward the other end of the room, and in doing so, her finger traced a line that inevitably passed through my corner. For a second, her eyes crossed with mine in the distance. I raised my freshly poured glass of wine and held her gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't make gestures. I just looked at her with the absolute calm of someone holding the detonator. She frowned, confused. Why was the old lady drinking expensive wine? Why had the manager been talking to her for so long? Why did she seem bigger? Doubt was sewn on her face. She turned to Jason and said something quickly, pointing at me slyly. Jason refused to turn around. The fear of guilt was stronger than his curiosity. The restaurant vibrated with electric energy. The gratitude of 30 families filled the air, but that gratitude had an edge. Everyone knew something special was happening, but no one knew who the benefactor was. No one, except me, the sweaty manager, and a waiter named Michael, who approached my table with a conspiratorial smile. "It's done, Mrs. Sterling," Michael whispered as he left me a clean napkin. "The manager already went to all the tables. Only that one is left." "Perfect," I said, enjoying the aroma of the wine. "And what are they ordering at table 5? Mrs. Jessica just ordered the lobster thermidor and a bottle of Moet. She said, quote, "If the service is slow, at least make what we're going to pay worth it. After all, Jason is paying." I let out a short, dry laugh. "Bring it to her. Bring her 2 lobsters if she wants. Let her enjoy every bite, because digestion is going to be very heavy." I looked toward my son and daughter-in-law. They were trapped in a bubble of ignorance, eating and drinking, believing themselves superior to the rest, superior to me. They didn't know that the walls surrounding them were mine. They didn't know the floor they walked on was mine. And soon they would know that respect isn't demanded with shouts, it is imposed with facts. The stage was set for the final act. Reynolds wiped sweat near the register, waiting for my signal to drop the guillotine. The bill for table 5 was climbing with every whim of Jessica's, and with every dollar added, my satisfaction increased. Today they weren't just going to pay a restaurant bill. They were going to pay for years of silence, scorn, and loneliness. And the receipt was going to have many zeros. "Michael," I said without taking my eyes off my daughter-in-law, "get ready. As soon as they ask for the check, I want to be in the front row, even if it's from this corner. Don't worry, ma'am, you have the best seat in the house." And he was right. Never had a dark corner been so illuminated by the certainty of imminent justice. The lobster thermidor was nothing more than a red, empty shell on Jessica's plate. When the mood at table 5 shifted from complacency to confusion, from my observatory between the brooms and the kitchen door, I saw her wipe the corners of her lips with a theatrical gesture, satisfied like a cat that just ate the fattest canary in the cage. Jason, on the other hand, had a glassy look, that expression of emotional indigestion I've known since he was a child hiding bad grades. Michael approached their table. He didn't carry the usual rush of harried waiters. He walked with a solemnity that was almost liturgical, carrying the black leather folder with the bill in his hands, as if it were a judicial sentence. "Do you desire anything else, or shall I bring the terminal?" Michael asked with impeccable courtesy, although from afar I could notice the tension in his shoulders. "The check, and make it quick," Jessica ordered without looking at him, searching for her compact mirror in her purse. "And hey, make sure to apply that promotion they're giving. I saw the table next door didn't get charged anything. I assume it's for Mother's Day, right?" Michael deposited the folder on the tablecloth. "Here you are, sir," he said, addressing Jason and deliberately ignoring Jessica. "The total is itemized." Jason opened the folder. I saw his eyes narrow first, trying to focus on the numbers, and then open disproportionately. His skin, already pale from the stress of the meal, took on a grayish tone. "Jessica," he murmured with a thread of a voice, "how much did that bottle of champagne cost?" "Oh, I don't know, Jason, the usual. Why are you making that face?" She snatched the folder from his hands impatiently. "Let me see." "What?" Jessica's scream made two diners at the neighboring table, who were enjoying their free coffee, turn to look. $900? She shrieked. "This is robbery. They're charging us down to the ice, and I don't see any discount here." "Hey, you," she yelled at Michael, who stood there, stoic as a soldier. "Where is the house courtesy? Everyone is leaving without paying." "The house courtesy, ma'am," Michael responded with a firm voice, was applied rigorously, according to the instructions of the building owner. All family tables received the invitation. "We are a family," bellowed Jessica, standing up. Her chair scraped the floor with an unpleasant sound. "I want to speak to the manager right now. This is discrimination." It was time. I made a discreet signal to Reynolds, who was waiting near the register, wiping sweat from his neck but with his gaze fixed on the target. The manager adjusted his jacket and walked toward table 5. He no longer looked like the scared man from half an hour ago. Now he walked with the backing of real power. "Any problem with the service, ma'am?" Reynolds asked upon arriving, with a calm that infuriated my daughter-in-law even more. "Of course there is a problem." Jessica waved the bill in the air like a war flag. Everyone was gifted their meal. I saw the gentleman over there leaving, hugging the waiters. "Why are you charging us $900? I demand that you apply the same promotion to us." Reynolds clasped his hands behind his back. "I am very sorry, ma'am." The Mother's Day promotion was a direct instruction from Sterling Oak Properties, the owner of the property. The order was clear: invite all mothers who were celebrating in harmony and with respect. An explicit exception was made for Table 5. Jason snapped his head up upon hearing the name. "Sterling Oak Properties," my son repeated with a trembling voice. As an architect, he knew that name. He had seen it on signs at the best commercial plazas, on development contracts where he barely managed to get minor subcontracts. He knew it was an invisible giant in the city. "Exactly, Mr. Sterling," Reynolds said. "The owner considered that your table did not meet the requirements of family dignity to be a beneficiary of her generosity." Jessica let out a hysterical laugh. "Dignity? And who is this owner to judge us? Surely some bitter old woman who has nothing better to do. Tell her to come here and say it to my face. I'm a lawyer. I can sue this place for unequal treatment." "That won't be necessary, Jessica," I said. My voice wasn't a scream, but it cut the air like a sharp knife. I had risen from my chair in the corner. I left my dirty napkin on the plastic table and began to walk toward the center of the room. The sound of my heels resonated in the sudden silence that had seized the restaurant. The waiters parted for me. The remaining customers, those who had benefited from my card, looked at me with curiosity. I walked slowly, back straight, chin up, hands crossed in front. I was no longer the nuisance mother-in-law. With every step, I recovered a piece of the authority I had ceded to them out of love. Jason saw me approaching and stood up clumsily, knocking his napkin to the floor. "Mom?" he asked, confused, looking from me to Reynolds and back to me. "What? What are you doing?" "Sit down, please. Don't make a scene." I reached the edge of his table, looked at the remains of the lobster, the half-finished crystal glasses, and finally locked my eyes on Jessica. She looked at me with disdain, but there was a shadow of doubt born in her gaze. "I'm not going to sit down, Jason," I responded with tranquility. "I already sat where I was told. in the corner next to the trash, where you thought I belonged." "Oh, please, Evelyn," Jessica interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Don't start with your victim dramas. We are discussing something important with the manager about the bill. Go to your corner and finish your coffee. We're leaving in a minute." "Silence, ma'am," Reynolds intervened sharply. The authority in his voice was such that Jessica closed her mouth by pure reflex. Show more respect when addressing the owner. Time froze. Jessica blinked, incredulous. Jason grabbed the edge of the table as if the floor were moving beneath his feet. My grandchildren, who until that moment hadn't lifted their eyes from their phones, raised their heads, feeling the electricity in the air. "Owner?" Jessica stammered, letting out a nervous laugh. "What are you talking about? She is Evelyn. She lives on a widow's pension. She knits blankets." I reached into my purse and pulled out my card case. I extracted a card identical to the one I had given Reynolds and let it fall onto Jessica's dirty plate. The small ivory rectangle landed softly on the remains of butter and lemon. "Read it, Jessica," I said softly. She picked it up with 2 fingers, with disgust, but her eyes scanned the gold letters. "Evelyn Sterling, President, Sterling Oak Properties." "No. This is a joke," she whispered, shaking her head. "Jason, your mother printed this at Kinko's, right? It's one of her senile delusions." Jason was looking at me with eyes full of tears. They weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of recognition. The puzzle of his life was assembling in his head at dizzying speed. The mysterious clients who arrived at his firm, the loans miraculously approved when he was on the brink of bankruptcy, the anonymous recommendations. "Sterling Oak," Jason said with a broken voice. "The office building downtown, the new shopping plaza. Mom, you are Sterling Oak?" "I am Sterling Oak, Jason," I confirmed, without looking away. "And this restaurant, the floor you stand on, the walls that surround you, it is all mine. Mr. Reynolds works for me. Michael works in my building. And you just humiliated the landlord in her own house." Jessica slumped into her chair as if the strings holding her up had been cut. Her face went from anger red to absolute terror white in seconds. She looked around and realized there were no allies. The waiters looked on with poorly disguised satisfaction. The manager looked at her coldly. And I looked at her with a disappointment that weighed more than hate. But mother-in-law?" Jessica started to stutter, changing her tone to a high-pitched, pleading one. "Well, you know how stress is." The table was very small. "The table was perfect, Jessica," I cut her off. "What was small was your heart. And you, Jason." I turned to my son. He lowered his head, unable to hold my gaze. "You allowed your wife to treat me like a stray dog. You allowed them to hide me. 30 people saw how they moved me from here, and you said nothing. You ate your steak and drank your wine while your mother sat alone listening to the shouts of the kitchen. Mom, forgive me. I didn't want to." Jessica insisted. He tried. Jason attempted to take my hand, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I said coldly. "I am no longer the mom who kisses your boo-boos. Now I am the businesswoman evaluating a bad investment. And unfortunately, my son, you have turned out to be a very poor investment." Reynolds stepped forward, sensing it was time to execute the final sentence. "Mrs. Sterling," the manager said, "do you wish for me to charge Table 5's bill to the house as a family courtesy, now that the situation is clarified?" Silence was absolute. Jessica looked at me with hope, with that manipulative look she used to use to ask me for money she never paid back. Jason looked at me with pleading. I smiled. A sad, but firm smile. "Absolutely not, Reynolds." My voice resonated clearly in the restaurant. "Charity begins at home, they say, but respect is earned. They haven't earned anything today. Charge them everything, absolutely everything. And I want payment right now." Jessica stifled a moan. Jason searched for his wallet with trembling hands. "Mom, the card is maxed out," he whispered, humiliated. "The kitchen remodel, Jessica's trip, it won't go through for $900. "That is not my problem, Jason," I replied, crossing my arms. "You have 2 options, pay or wash dishes. And considering there is a mountain of dirty china in the kitchen because I treated 100 people to lunch, I suggest you find a way to pay." "This is absurd." Jessica exploded again, trying to regain some ground. "Jason is your son. You can't do this to us. You have millions, from what I see. What kind of mother does this? I leaned over the table, resting my hands on the sauce-stained tablecloth. My face was inches from hers. I could see real fear in her dilated pupils. What kind of mother? I whispered, with volcanic intensity. The kind of mother who taught you that in life, everything has a price. Jessica, you wanted privacy, right? She eats apart, you said. Well then. Privacy costs. Exclusivity costs. And today, the lesson is going to cost you $900. I straightened up and looked at Reynolds. If the card doesn't go through, call the police. Attempted fraud for consumption without funds. No favoritism. Mom, Jason yelled, terrified. You can't call the police. I'm an architect. My reputation. Your reputation ended the moment you lowered your head and let them humiliate the woman who gave you life, I sentenced. I turned around. I didn't need to see more. I knew Jason would find a way to pay. He would call a friend, take a quick loan on an app, or use the emergency credit card he kept for life or death. This was life or death. It was the death of his comfort and the birth of my freedom. I walked toward the exit. As I passed the tables where the other families were finishing their desserts, people started to applaud. First it was timid, a couple of claps, then others joined. They knew I was the secret benefactor, and although they didn't understand all the drama, they understood that justice had been served. An older lady, sitting in a wheelchair near the door, stopped me, touching my arm gently. God bless you, ma'am, she told me with moist eyes. Thank you for the meal, and thank you for putting yourself in your place. Sometimes children forget who taught them to walk. I squeezed her hand affectionately. Enjoy your day. I went out to the lobby, where the air conditioning was cooler. Behind me, I heard the commotion at table 5. I heard Jessica crying, blaming Jason. I heard Jason shouting for the first time, telling her to shut up. I heard the sound of a card being declined at the terminal and Reynolds' implacable voice demanding another method of payment. Michael ran out behind me before I crossed the glass doors to the street. Mrs. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling. I stopped and turned. The boy had eyes shining with emotion. Yes, Michael, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. He grinned from ear to ear. Mr. Jason is calling a partner to wire him money. They are destroyed. Sometimes you have to demolish to rebuild, Michael. In architecture and in family. I took a $100 bill from my purse and handed it to him. This is for you, for your discretion and your good service. And tell your coworkers that Monday at 8 a.m. I want to see everyone. We are going to renegotiate your wages. The abuse ends in my building. Michael took the bill, but then did something unexpected. He took my hand and kissed it with respect, as if I were an ancient queen. Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. We'll be waiting for you. I went out to the street. The afternoon sun hit my face, but it didn't bother me. It felt warm, alive. My chauffeur, whom I had called discreetly 10 minutes ago, was waiting with the impeccable black Lincoln Town car in front of the entrance right where Jason had parked his leased SUV. The valet opened the rear door. Before getting in, I cast one last look at the brick facade of the Ember Room. It was a good building, solid, resistant, like me. Jason and Jessica stayed inside, dealing with public shame and debt. I was going home, to my house full of gardenias and jazz music, where the memory of Arthur would no longer look at me with worry, but with pride. I had recovered my name, I had recovered my power, and although I had eaten alone in a corner, I had never felt more full. The car engine started smoothly. "Where to, Mrs. Sterling?" asked Robert, the driver. I looked through the window, watching my son's silhouette gesticulating desperately through the restaurant glass. "To the office, Robert. I have to draft a new lease agreement, and I think I'm going to need a very specific clause about the right of admission for ungrateful daughters-in-law." As the car pulled away, I knew this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning of the true management of my empire. Jason would have to come find me. He would have to crawl. And when he did, he would find that the door to Sterling Oak Properties is heavy and difficult to open for those who don't bring the key of humility in their hand. It has been exactly 3 months since that Mother's Day that changed the history of my life. And if someone had told me that at 68 I would be reinventing my own existence, I would have laughed in their face. But here I am, sitting in the leather executive chair of the main office of Sterling Oak Properties, with a panoramic view of the city I helped build brick by brick alongside Arthur. I am no longer the shadow knitting in the living room. Now I am the light that decides where the shadows fall. The office smells of fresh coffee and wood polish, a mix that has always seemed to me the perfume of progress. My desk, previously managed by administrators I supervised from my kitchen, is now full of my folders, my fountain pens, and a photo of Arthur smiling, as if approving every signature I stamp. My secretary, an efficient woman named Claudia, knocked on the door softly. "Mrs. Sterling. Architect Sterling is here. He has an appointment at 10. I looked at the clock. It was 10 on the dot. Before, Jason arrived at my house whenever he wanted, or didn't arrive at all, assuming my time was worth nothing because Mom is always there. Now, if he wants to see me, he has to schedule an appointment like any other vendor. Send him in, Claudia. And bring us 2 coffees, please. Black, no sugar." The door opened and Jason entered. He looked different. Thinner, with marked dark circles under his eyes, and a suit a little less impeccable than usual. He no longer had that air of arrogance with which he walked through the restaurant that day. He entered with slumped shoulders, holding a roll of blueprints under his arm, as if it were a shield. "Good morning, Mom. I mean, Madam President," he corrected quickly with a nervous smile. "Good morning, Jason. Sit down." I pointed to the chair in front of my desk. I didn't get up to hug him. Those hugs he has to earn back. Jason sat down, placing the plans on the table with care. His hands shook slightly. "I brought the preliminary drafts for the remodeling of the South Plaza, just as you requested in the bid. I worked all night to have them ready." I nodded, taking the documents. "I hope they are better than last time, Jason. Remember that I am not giving you the contract because you are my son. I am giving you the opportunity to bid. If the costs don't add up or the design isn't functional, I will give it to the Gomez firm." "I know, Mom, I know." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Believe me, I understand." The silence that followed was heavy, but necessary. Jason had to sell his new SUV to pay the restaurant debt and cover his household expenses, since I cut off the flow of extra money that, without him knowing, I injected into his business through phantom commissions. Now he had to survive on his real talent. "How is Jessica?" I asked, not out of genuine interest in her well-being, but to measure the terrain. Jason made a grimace of pain. "She's still furious. She says you humiliated her before society, that her friends at the country club don't invite her to brunches anymore because the rumor of what happened at the restaurant got out." Jason lowered his voice. "We had to let the housekeeper go, Mom. Jessica has to clean the house and cook now. She says it's torture." I smiled slightly, taking a sip of my coffee. "Welcome to the real world, son. Cleaning the house isn't torture, it's dignity. Maybe that way she learns to value the person who serves the plate on the table. And my grandkids, how are they?" "Surprisingly well," admitted Jason with a spark of amazement. "At first they complained because I downgraded their data plan, but the other day the oldest asked me if he could come see you. He says he saw on the internet that you own half the town and wants to know how you made your fortune. I think they admire you more now that they know you're powerful." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. It is sad that money buys the attention that love could not secure, but if that is the entry door to teach those boys values, I will use it. Tell them they can come on Saturday, but not to play on their phones. If they come, it's so I can teach them to read a financial statement and understand the value of work. If they want an inheritance, they are going to have to learn to manage it, not squander it. Jason nodded with moist eyes. "Mom, forgive me. I know I've already said it, but I've been an idiot. I was so blind trying to please Jessica, trying to fake a rich life I didn't have, that I forgot who always held me up. I looked at him intently. I saw my son, the man I raised, fighting to get out from under the layers of vanity. Forgiveness is demonstrated with actions, Jason, not with words. Keep working. Win this contract. Treat your wife with reality, not fantasies. And then, maybe we will eat together again on a Sunday, but not at a separate table." Jason stood up, gathered his things, and before leaving, stopped. "Thanks, Mom, for the lesson. It was expensive, but necessary." When the door closed, I let out the air I didn't know I was holding. It was hard to be like this. My mother's heart wanted to run, give him a check, and tell him everything was fine. But my matriarch's head knew that would be condemning him to eternal failure. Arthur was right. Intelligent love sometimes hurts. That afternoon, I decided to make a supervision visit to the Ember Room. I hadn't returned since that day. I had sent my auditors. I had reviewed the numbers from afar, but I needed to see the change with my own eyes. I arrived unannounced, as I like to do now. The chauffeur opened the door and I stepped down, feeling the afternoon heat. The restaurant sign shone clean. The entrance was swept. There was no trash accumulated in the corners. Upon entering, the change in atmosphere was palpable. That electric tension of bitter and scared employees was no longer felt. There was soft music. The air conditioning worked perfectly. My technicians took care of that the next day, and the waiters moved with a different energy. Mr. Reynolds saw me from the bar and almost dropped a glass, but he recovered quickly. He came toward me, not running with fear like the last time, but walking with professional respect. "Mrs. Sterling, what an honor to have you here." He made a small bow. "Do you desire your table?" "Which table, Reynolds? The broom corner?" I asked with a raised eyebrow, though with a less cutting tone. Reynolds turned red as a tomato, but smiled. "That table no longer exists, ma'am. We removed it. Now we put a beautiful ornamental plant there. I have reserved the bay window table for you. The best view in the house." "That sounds fine. But first I want to greet the kitchen." I walked toward the service zone. The cooks, upon seeing me, stopped chopping onions and moving pans. They wiped their hands on their aprons. I smiled at them. "Good afternoon, boys. I've seen the sales reports. The food has improved. It shows that you work with pleasure now." "It's just that now they pay us overtime, boss," said one of the grill men, a large man with a mustache. "And the kitchen AC works. We aren't roasting alive in here anymore. Thanks to you." "Don't thank me. It's fair. Work well. Take care of my business, and my business will take care of you." I searched for Michael with my eyes. I didn't see him anywhere. I felt a small pang of disappointment. Had he quit? "Where is Michael?" I asked Reynolds when we went back out to the dining room. "Ah, Michael." Reynolds smiled with pride. "Michael is no longer a server, ma'am. Thanks to the scholarship you instructed be created for employees with potential. Michael is now in the administrative offices on the morning shift, learning, accounting, and restaurant management. He only comes in at night to cover supervisor shifts." At that moment, the entrance door opened, and Michael entered. He was dressed in street clothes, with a backpack on his shoulder and books in hand. He looked more mature, more sure of himself. Upon seeing me, his eyes lit up with that same warmth that had comforted me when I was alone in the corner. "Mrs. Sterling." He approached quickly and shook my hand firmly. "What a joy to see you." "Hello, future manager," I told him, squeezing his hand. "They tell me you are taking advantage of the opportunity." "Yes, ma'am. I'm studying business administration at the community college. It's heavy working and studying, but," he pointed to his chest, "now I feel like I have a future." "You opened a door I saw locked with a padlock." "I only gave you the key, Michael. You are the one walking through it. Keep it up. I need trustworthy people for when we expand Sterling Oak to other cities." Michael nodded, excited. Seeing him progressing like this was worth more than any rent I could collect. That was true power, the capacity to transform lives, not just accumulate figures in a bank. I sat at the bay window table. I ate alone, but I wasn't alone. Reynolds approached a couple of times to ensure everything was fine, but without being cloying. The other diners looked at me with respect. Some even nodded at me, recognizing me as the figure of authority in the place. I ordered a glass of wine, the same Cabernet. While I drank it, I observed the street through the glass. I saw people passing, mothers with their children, young couples. I thought of Arthur. For years after his death, I had felt like a ship adrift. I had let myself be convinced that my time had passed, that my role was to be the quiet grandma who doesn't get in the way. I had allowed sadness to become submission. But Arthur didn't fall in love with a submissive woman. He fell in love with the Evelyn who carried cement bags, with the Evelyn who negotiated with suppliers down to the last penny, with the Evelyn who had fire in her gaze. "You took a little while, old girl, but you came back." I could almost hear his raspy voice in my ear, mixed with the background music. Yes, I had returned, and I liked this version of myself better. It was a version cured by time, hardened by disappointment, but polished by dignity. Jessica and Jason thought that by excluding me, they were making me small. They didn't know that by putting me in that corner, they gave me the perspective I needed to see how big my own resources were and how small their attitudes were. They did me a favor. They woke me up. I finished my meal and asked for the check. Reynolds tried to refuse. The house treats, Mrs. Sterling. It is your restaurant after all. No, Reynolds. I took out my card, that black card that was now legendary among the staff. In my businesses, everything is accounted for. Charge me. I want the accounts to be clear, always. Order starts at the head. I paid, left a generous tip for the team, and left. My chauffeur was waiting for me. As I got into the car, I pulled out my electronic planner. I had a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce Board at 5. Tomorrow, a site visit to the North Properties. The weekend, the finance class with my grandkids. My life was full of purpose, full of challenges, full of respect. The car advanced down the main avenue. We passed in front of an exclusive clothing store, the kind where Jessica used to buy her dresses to show off. I saw her coming out of there, but not with shopping bags, with empty hands and a face of frustration. Her card had surely been declined, or she was simply looking at what she could no longer have. For a second, I felt the impulse to tell the driver to stop, to offer her a ride. But I stopped myself. No, she has to walk. She has to feel the pavement under her feet to understand what it costs to move forward. I walked for a long time. Now it's my turn to ride in the back seat, directing the course. I looked at my hands resting on my lap. The age spots were still there, the wrinkles too, but I no longer saw them as signs of decay. They were my map. They were the testimony of every battle won, of every wall raised, of every contract signed. I am Evelyn. I am 68 years old. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. But above all, I am the master of my fate. And if anyone tries to put me in a corner again, they will discover that it doesn't matter where they seat me. I always preside over the table. The sun was setting over the city, dyeing the buildings gold, my buildings, my legacy. I smiled, closed my eyes for a moment, and let the movement of the car rock me. The future looked bright, and for the first time in a long time, I was in a hurry to get to it. "Robert," I said, opening my eyes, "turn up the music a little. Put on that jazz standard Arthur liked. The way you look tonight. Today is a good day to celebrate." "Yes, Mrs. Sterling," he responded. The music filled the car. I didn't need anyone to let me shine. I had enough light of my own.